First speaker of the session is Dr. Navnath Gawande, who will be speaking on targeting DNA damage response and DNA repair pathways for cancer therapy. Dr. Navnath is working as an assistant professor of pharmaceutical sciences. He joined Wayne State University in 2019. Previously, he was assistant professor at the College of Pharmacy, St. George University. And he was a research assistant professor in the hematology and oncology section of the Indiana University Department of Medicine from 2015 to 18. He completed his postdoctoral fellowships at Indiana University under Professor John Perchi and at Purdue University under distinguished Professor A.K. Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh laboratory has created Darunavir, an FDA-approved first drug treatment of drug-resistant HIV for AIDS patients. Gawande has extensive experience working at the interface of chemistry and biology. He is the founding member and also served as chair from 2009 to 10 of the University of Sydney AAPS Students Chapter. He is one of the co-founder of NervX Biosciences. US government recently awarded him $3 million for his cancer drug discovery projects. With this introduction, I invite Dr. Gawande to present his lecture.
Thank you, Dr. Hemant, for that kind introduction, and then I hope I stay up to mark with your introduction. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending upon where you are. First of all, I would like to, thank Dr. Hemant Jadhav, Dr. Anil Gaikwad, Dr. Chitkara, Dr. Sundriyal, Dr. Atish Paul, and also organizing committee for the invitation. I can say as many of my colleagues, seniors and juniors are here, and I'm happy to present whatever work we are doing. So I'm going to present my talk in two topics, and then mainly the first topic is more about drug discovery and how we put the drug in the preclinical trial, and then second one is our unique mechanism where we go with drug discovery approach. If you go for next slide, Dr. Hemant. So if you look at, I'm going to talk about the US mortality context, and then also if you look at I think the same thing happened in the world also, if you look at last 25 years mortality data, cancer is the second leading cause of the death after cardiovascular diseases. Half of the men, and then I think the one third of the women develop cancer during their lifetime. Next slide, please. Lung cancer is is the leading cause of cancer death in the US and also in the worldwide. I mean, there are two types of lung cancer, but if you look at that, US only, there is almost 250,000 cases get diagnosed yearly. And if you look at the 5 years relative survival rate with lung cancer, it's just less than 20%. And then out of that, the NSCLC, it's called non-small cell lung cancer, is the most common subtypes on lung cancer, which accounts for about 80 to 85%. And if you look at the standard care and first line therapy for the lung cancer, it's a platinum-based combination therapy. And if it's patient is not responding, then go with the second line therapy and third line therapy. It's all about the EGFR inhibitors. And also nowadays immunotherapy is doing good, but immunotherapy is again personalized medicine. Next, please. And if you look at the DNA damaging agents for the cancer therapy, I think in World War II, the DNA damaging agents like radiotherapy, nitrogen musters, antifolates, and topoisomerase, all of them came in the picture during World War II and then after that. But one of the interesting things is that alkylating agent, it was a serendipitous discovery. The platinum agents, cisplatin, and there are prodrugs, carboplatin, oxoplatin. Approximately half of the patients who received anti-cancer chemotherapy are treated with the platinum drug at some point. But what happened? If you look at the mechanistic effect of the platinum therapy, it binds to the DNA adducts, and then when it binds, the formation of DNA adducts interfere with DNA replication, its transcription, and the cell division, and ultimately induce the cell death. But what happened, the platinum therapy works very well in the beginning, but eventually it forms the resistance. And there are a lot of factors involved in that, intrinsic and extrinsic factors. But if you look at among them, DNA damaging repair capacity is one of the major concerns. Next slide, please. So in 2015, there was a Nobel Prize got awarded to identifying these repair pathways. And then if you look at this, as I said, that make radiotherapy or radiomimetic agents or topoisomerase or even the platinum therapy induces their effect, damaging the DNA, the cancer cell DNA. And there are different damages like a double strand breaks, single strand breaks, intra-strand cross links. And eventually, cancer cells are smart, and then, they have the repair mechanism going on. And there are different repair mechanisms are there. Non-homologous joining pathway, homologous repair, BR there, other DDR is there. So today, so next please. So today I'm going to talk about two things. Back please, sorry. So today I'm going to talk about, first I'm going to talk about, the targets, protein targets. There are many targets are involved in there. There are a lot of pharmaceuticals companies are extensively working to get drugs with the DNA repair mechanism. And then today I'm going to talk about the replication protein A we are targeting. There are two groups in the all over the world working on the developing drugs for the RPA. One of them is us. And then second talk is all about mechanistic study, how we found the Cu70, Cu80 inhibitors, which is activating the DNA PK. Next slide, please. If we look at the nucleotide excision repair, it catalyzes the removal of the bulky adducts damaged from DNA. And as I said earlier, that platinum forms the DNA adducts with the cancer cell, and then this nucleotide excision repair come in the picture. So see, when your platinum is binding to DNA, eventually nucleotide excision repair, the protein goes overexpressed, they wrap around that DNA, so platinum doesn't work that well, and platinum forms drug resistance. That's why it's well known that NER is responsible for the removal of platinum DNA damage. And if you look at this replication protein A, it's involved in the DNA recognition and verification process, and it's early in the pathway. And that's why, resistance of the platinum-based therapy, it's one of the factor. Next slide, please. There is a perfect example I would like to give you that, when you have decreased level of NER proteins, the platinum therapy works very well. And one of the example is a testicular cancer. Lawrence Ian Vaughan, I got a chance to work with him because one of my boss was his student. And I was with IU School of Medicine, and he developed, platinum combination therapy, and it's called a drug cocktail. It's a combination of the, cisplatin, bleomycin, and etoposide. All those are the, DNA damaging agent. And if you see the testicular cancer cure rate, he changed from 10% to 95%. And there are a lot of famous patients he treated, Lance Armstrong, which was the world-known American cyclist, our own legendary Indian cricket player, Yuvraj Singh. So all of them got treatment with him, and they are doing well. There is no relapse. So germline cancer got treated very well. So that I can say there is two things you want to take message from here, that you can develop very good therapy with the drug combination. And second thing, if you need money to get the therapy and get the cure. And I think all these people have that one. Next slide, please. Next slide. So we did the clinical validation because, there are, as I said, there are only two groups are working on looking at the RPA, one of the ours, and then there is one in the Arizona. And then we look at in the cancer patients, and then Dr. Shadia Jalal and Dr. Daniel Mette, they both did tremendous job looking at the patient sample. And we found that, there is overexpression of RPA in lung and ovarian cancer patient, and also in some metastatic cancer. And then, if you look at the RPA expression inversely correlates with the overall survival of lung cancer, and then also progression of free survival in both cancer. And then, that's giving the clinical rationale to target RPA to treat cancer. And if you look at this, Kaplan-Meier analysis, if you look at that one, when you have the, high expression of the RPA in the both lung cancer and ovarian cancer, the patient survival is, less. Next slide, please. As I said, RPA is also involved in the NER pathway. It's also involved in the homologous directed repair pathway also, and it's also involved in the DNA replication. And DNA replication gives it can work as a monotherapy also. And then most of the solid tumors relies on the RPA for the replication process. Next slide. You can utilize these RPA inhibitors in the chemical synthetic lethality approach when you have the patient with HRR, like homologous recombination repair deficient cancer in the HRR proficient individual. You can have the cisplatin in the combination of the RPA inhibitors. And then if you see in the normal cells, HRR proficient cells, even though you block the NER, you still have the HRR working, and then DNA repair happens in the normal cell survival. But when you have the cancer cells or the cancer patient with HRR deficiency, like BRCA1, BRCA2 kind of thing, and then when you block the HRR, NER, then you also block the HRR because they are deficient with that one, and then you get the maximum efficacy. So there is another concept you can utilize with that one. Next slide, please. So if you look at the structure of the replication protein A, it's heterotrimeric protein. It has RPA 17, RPA 32, and RPA 14. And there is one group in the Vanderbilt University. They are looking protein-protein interaction site, but our group is looking at the DNA binding sites. And this AB fold, both of them are binding to the DNA, and that's what we are targeting to develop the drugs. Next slide, please. So we did high throughput screening with the NCI, National Chemical Cancer Institute Library, and then Chem Division Library. And we found that, I won't say that they are moderately potent, but they're okay to start from there. Both TDRL 505 and TDRL 501 and 505 shows some activity. And then we decided to do the medicinal chemistry first. Next slide, please. Before that, we did the docking, and we found that, the compound is binding in between the interdomain. Also, it's binding to domain A and domain B. But we decided to focus on the interdomain because, if you target the interdomain, so you can disturb both the domains. So that was our plan. And then we decided to go to the SAR studies. And if you look at the SAR studies, we decided to go with the 3-4 arms, like, changing the aromatic ring, changing that carboxylic side, and then changing the, the ether group, and then also looking at the chiral center, which is present in the molecule. Next slide, please. So the chemistry is pretty straightforward. When it comes to the medicinal chemistry, everything is, you look at whatever the established method is there, and we established that method very well. And so if you look at over here, it's, you're just putting that amine with acetic anhydride, then doing the Wilsmer-Hack reaction to get that aldehyde. Once you have that aldehyde, you do the condensation reaction. Once you have this propene group, then you do the hydrazine nitrate reaction to get that heterocyclic ring pyrazolane. And then once you have that one, you put it the carboxylic side in. Next slide, please. So we did initially how we can access this biological activity, and then we look at this is kind of test tube assay. We look at in the binding of the the RPA and the DNA. When you have free DNA, this is the gel electrophoresis assay. We call EMSA. It's electrophoretic mobility shift assay. And when you see the pre-DNA, it's a positive control. And then when you see the RPA and DNA, when you mix it, it goes up because it depends on the molecular weight. And when you have the inhibitor in the increasing concentration, you can see there is complete inhibition is going on. So this star is, this is coming from E. coli. We have single strand E. coli over there. That is our one of the positive control also. So it shows a specificity towards the RPA DNA inhibition. And then both compounds inhibit moderately. It's not that potent, but so I'll go next slide, please. If you look at these compounds, right, we changed some few things, but the activity was not that great. If you click one more time, I think the month. Can you click one more time, please? Yeah. So if you look at these compounds, like TDL 505, 551, they're like in vitro IC50 is not that great. Cellular IC50 was okay, but it was a starting point for us because we are still validating drug target over there. So next slide, please. So we as I said that we need to validate this target. So we look at that does this compound us, there is anti-cancer activity is there or not. And we use very high concentration, up to 300 milligram per kg. Drug is very well tolerated, minimal toxicity is there. Then we look at the combination therapy, and I just want to let you know that we use the 200 milligram per kg, which is high dose. And then if you look at the right-hand side here, the vehicle control value, and this is a H460 xenograft mouse model. And H460 is high-growing tumor. The fast-growing tumor. And then if you look at the 551 compound and platinum almost has a similar effect. And when you do the combination, it has almost twofold increase in the activity. So we found out that we are in the right direction, but we need to optimize our compound to go next on the next step. Next slide, please. So again, we look at this compound, what kind of interaction is happening. And then we saw that, there is, we can optimize that ring A. Then also we can optimize side chain, and also, we can have the chiral center going on. So this side chain is, sticking out towards the, solvent exposed region. So that's why we thought, we can also increase the solubility and pharmacokinetics and dynamics of our compounds. Next slide, please. So again, we did the simple synthesis chemistry, but over here we put the morpholino group, and then on the ring A we put it using Suzuki coupling. We put the aryl and heteroaryl compounds, and then we extended those both sides. Next slide, please. If you look at the single agent activity, so after the optimization, single agent activity in H460 cell lines using the CCK8 metabolic assay. So RPF initial compound was RPIC50 around 9.6 micromolar, cellular was 18 micromolar. And if you look at all the modification, we did a lot of modification, but this is the one of the best one. If you look at NG329, so it has the almost RPIC50 around 2 micromolar, but cellular activity is almost, I think I can say 340 increase. And next slide, please. And we checked, the most of the carboxylic acid counterparts, they have the metabolic instability, and then also one thing is the cellular permeability. So then we look at back. Can you go back, please? And if you look at in the top of the slide, we look at the uptake. And then if you look at the 551 compound, it has very less uptake. And that might be the reason it has, less cellular activity. Then we, with the morpholino compound, if you look at that 329, backslide please, 329 that, it has increased cellular uptake. And so then next slide. Then we look at other, pharmacokinetic and safety profile of this compound. If you look at the area under curve, is pretty good. Tmax is pretty good. T1 half is pretty good with NG329 as compared to 319. And then also there is no HARG activity until 25 micromolar compound. And none of the compound, all these three compound, none of the compound shows the HARG activity at the concentration of 25 micromolar. And then cytochrome P450, even the 10 micromolar, none of the isoform, especially we look at the major 6 isoforms, and none of the isoforms got inhibited with the 10 micromolar concentration. Next slide. So this is a molecular interaction, after that 329, if you look at that one, there is a pi-pi stacking going on with, aromatic ring with the tryptophan 361, carboxylic acid side chain is, it's having interaction with the lysine 313, and this morpholin ring, it's actually, I can show in the 2D picture, it's sticking out in the solvent exposed region. So the compound is, beautifully fitting in the interdomain, and in it's also, the morpholin part, it's coming out of that, it's increasing the solubility of the compound. Next slide, please. So as I said earlier, we are looking RP and DNA interaction, and as I also said that most of the times what happened, so these compounds, most of the anti-cancer agents has the DNA binding capacity, but we are not looking for the DNA binding capacity. We are looking for the RP inhibitors. So we want to see that does our compound inhibit the DNA, and then we did the DNA intercalation assay. And if you look at here, at the left-hand side, that the doxorubicin is a positive control for which is DNA chelating agent. And if you see, it has a very beautiful IC50 over there. But our initial compound 551, it was not inhibiting at all the DNA. So that was a good thing. And the new analogs, what we developed, it was also not showing significant inhibition of the DNA. So that's we proved this this way that this compound is not binding to the DNA. We also did the thermal shift assay, but due to time limit, I'm not going to show that one. But in the thermal shift assay, our compound is showing very beautiful denaturation at the higher temperature. Next slide, please. So as I said that, we want to decrease the dose, increase the efficacy. So we look at the NG329 again in the mice model. Safety profile was good. And this time instead of 200 milligram per kg, we are was able to use 50 milligram per kg and 100 milligram per kg. That was, good therapeutic dose for our compound. And we are able to reduce carboplatin, from the, 10 milligram to 6 milligram per kg. So that was a good thing. Next slide, please. If you look at the, again, the NSCLC's H460 xenograft mice model data, if you look at the vehicle control, as I said, H460 is, fast growing tumor. And then if you look at the vehicle control and compare the carboplatin and our NG329 single agent activity in 25 milligram per kg, it's almost, similar. When we increased 50 milligram per kg, it was increased. This is again single agent, increased almost twofold. And when we combine with carboplatin and NG329, 6 to 50 milligram per kg, we can see almost complete tumor regression. So that was excellent data. We got almost similar data with ovarian cancer also, but I'm not going to present that one again. But I'm going to focus on more on the lung cancer. So this was the excellent data. So next slide, please. As I said earlier, there is a chiral center sitting in there. So we separated both chiral centers. So we founded the company Nerex Biosciences, and we licensed all our whatever our discovery and development to the Nerex Biosciences. And now they are next slide please. They are separating these chiral isomers. One of the isomers is showing very good activity than the other one. And they're also going to evaluate again those chiral centers in the lung cancer and ovarian cancer models. They did some formulation studies, GMP synthesis, and then next slide, please. Recently, Nerex Biosciences, initially in 2018, they got $500,000, but recently, 3 months back, before during the COVID-19, we got almost 2.25 million angel investor, $1 million from angel investor to file the IND with this NG329 compounds. Next slide, please. So just to summarize what we did so far, RPA is again novel target. We improved the in vitro, cellular, and in vivo activity of the RPA inhibitors. NG329 completely shows single anti-cancer activity. Also in the combination with carboplatin, both NSCLCL, H460, and xenograft mouse model, it shows very good monotherapy single agent activity. It also shows good pharmacokinetic and safety profiles. We also have the data with RPA inhibitors also, in combination with etoposide and bleomycin. It also shows very good synergy. Further, as I said earlier, that further preclinical studies are underway in Nerex Biosciences, and hopefully will push forward next to the phase 1 clinical trials. Next slide, please. So I will go on the next topic. That project second topic is all about mechanistic finding, and then how we develop the earlier precursor inhibitors rather than going in the traditional way. Development of DNAPK inhibitors by targeting very unique site, that's Cu17 Cu80 protein interaction. Next slide, please. I think if you look at the radiotherapy, radiotherapy is one of the first line therapy for the lung cancer and then also head and neck cancer, but the toxic side effects is one of the major thing, and then resistance is another thing. But what we found that, while working on the other projects, we found that, some of the compound binds to the Cu17 Cu80, and then we already proved that Cu17 Cu80 activates the DNAPK. So we decided to, develop some, compounds on that. And then next slide, please. Earlier I talked about the nucleotide excision repair pathway. Now we are going to talk about the non-homologous end joining pathway, where you have the double strand break repair. And then this double strand break repair are considered the most severe cytotoxic DNA lesions. And what happened normally, this lesion repaired through two distinct pathways. One is homologous recombination and another one is NHAG. But NHAG is most prominent pathway in there. And if you look at this at the right-hand side, when DNA damage happens, DNA double-strand break happens, but this CO is absolutely necessary to activate this DNAPK pathway. And again, DNAPK is, kinase binding site. And, there is a lot of problems with the kinase inhibitors, but I will go through that one in the next my slides. Next slide, please. So if you look at the DNA-PK, it's a validated drug target for cancer therapy. And it's a serine threonine protein kinase. It's a member of PIKK superfamily. And it also, along with the protein, it also functions with other proteins like ATM, ATR, and mTOR. Those are all the kinase proteins. And it's also shown that DNA-PK is overexpressed in many cancers. And it has multiple roles. It has a DNA DSP repair. It has, HRR deficient cancer cells. As I said, we can use it in the synthetic lethality. It can also, it involve the DNA damage response. It can activate p53-H2X. It can also go through the cell signaling pathway to activate even the EGFR and AKT pathway. And overall, you have the better cancer survival, cell survival, and also it forms the resistance with the current chemotherapy. And if you see here in the DNA-PK interact with the ATM ATR, and if you see CO is actually activating that DNA-PK, and then pathway falls in between. Next slide, please. As I said, DNA-PK is a kinase binding site, and then targeting active site of ATP binding pocket in DNA-PK kinase domain. And there are 4 drugs are in the preclinical, I can say the preclinical and clinical stages. Merck compound is got approved in the phase 1 trials. Vertex compound is going on, but they're all targeting the DNA-PK kinase domain. And then, but as I said that earlier, that CO activate the DNA-PK, and then the next tab, please. Targeting co-DNA binding is novel and unprecedented approach for the kinase inhibition. And again, there are only 3 groups are working on that. And again, I don't want to go through this slide, but we can utilize the, the synthetic lethality approach here. Again, also, we can utilize the combination therapy and synthetic lethality approach to develop the, the more efficient drug combination. Next slide, please. So if you look at this XAT compound, it has IC50 around 75 micromolar in the, again, the EMSA, electrophoretic mobility shift assay, and then DNA-PK activity is 40 micromolar. So this is very high, I can say that, this is not the considerable activity when it comes to the DNA-PK, because DNA-PK is, it's enzymatic assay. Then we look at, how these compounds binds. And if you see, this is DNA over here, and then this 270 with magenta and in cyan, and then 280 is in magenta color. You can see it's beautifully spanning in between the interface of the COO70 and COO80 without interacting with DNA. Next slide, please. We look at very close interaction of this compound, XAT compound, and we see that number of interaction is going on. There is room for the pocket improvement of the the activity, and then we can extend that pocket to more occupancy kind of way. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, so we synthesize many compounds, and then I will go through the synthetic part. You did get this pyrazolone ring by interacting with ethyl acetoacetate with phenylhydrazine. And then once you get that one, protect that acid with ester, and then you get this number 7 furan carboxylic acid using the Suzuki coupling. Then we do the novel gel condensation reaction to get the compound number 8, and then after that we do the standard amide coupling, and then hydrolysis, and then there is a double bond over there, that's a G and E isomer. And then so G isomer is, so we did the NMR NOSI analysis, and we found that G isomer is around 70%. And then E isomer is around 30%. Then we reduce that double bond to to get the single isomer, but we still have a rotamer over here. But at least we have the single isomer over here by reduction of that double bond. Next slide. So again, here we did the EMSA assay. If you look at in the EMSA assay, this compound like 68 and 132 shows very good inhibition of the co-DNA interaction. Next slide. If we look at the DNA-PK phosphorylation assay, because I said that if compound inhibits CO and DNA interaction, it should inhibit DNA-PK association. And then we look at in the phosphorylation assay, and then if you see here, the compound is almost this both compound having the almost mid micromolar activity. Next slide. We synthesize almost 90 to 94 compounds, and if you compare now XAT compound and 132. 68 and 132 compounds, if you see that, initially we had a co-activity around 75 micromolar, but after extending that carboxylic acid to the aromatic ring, we got almost 7 micromolar. Again, DNA-PK activity is not that great as we expecting with the 132 compound. Next slide, please. 132 compound is around 980 nanomolar. And then if you see back, please, sorry. If you see that, if you compare double bond versus single bond, I think single bond has a better activity than the double bond. So that was our take-home message from this series of compounds. Next slide. Then we look at carboxylic acid position, and we look at the carboxylic acid at the para position. We also look at the bioisosteres of the carboxylic acid. Next slide. Carboxylic acid, and then if you see that tetrazole containing compounds has the better activity than the earlier compounds. And if you look at the compound 245, it has almost DNA-PK IC50 around 220 nanomolar. So that was a good thing. Next slide. When we look at the docking studies and how the molecule are fitting there, we thought that if we change that methyl group to the most bioisosteric form of the CF3. Next slide. And then we changed that one. It was a game changer for us. And if we compare compound 132 to 322, we got a co-IC50 from around 1 micromolar and DNA-PK IC50 around 110 nanomolar. Next slide. As I said earlier that, what we are trying to do now, electrostatic repulsion is happening in between that furan ring. That's why we have 70-30 ratio. Then we plan to do the, instead of furan ring, we thought, change the thiophene ring, and we can have electrostatic interaction, and we'll get the Z exclusive Z isomer. Next slide. We also plan to, do the, because let's have the pyrazole moiety over there. So, because of hydrogen bond interaction, we can have the, again, exclusive Z isomer. Because when it comes to the FDA approval, you need exclusively one isomer. Next slide. And this strategy is beautifully utilized, and developing sunitinib drug. So we are following that same strategy to, develop our compounds. Next slide. We did the replacement of ring C, with thiophene, but unfortunately, this compound have the moderate activity like the furan ring, but this compound shows, toxic effect with the normal cells. So we discontinue this series. Next slide. So the most important things, like when it comes to the biological analysis, as I said, we are not looking to, inhibit the DNA-PK, but we are looking at the Cu70, Cu80 interaction. And if our compound inhibiting Cu70, Cu80, and then it ultimately inhibit the DNA-PK, but it should not inhibit other kinases. So we screened related 24 kinases with our lead compounds. And if you see that, our DNA-PK IC50 is 220 nanomolar. Here we use around 2.5 micromolar concentration, except PIM1 and some of the, kinases, MEK and all that. The compound, I can say 10x IC50 value, or none of the all of the three compounds didn't inhibit other kinases. So that was a good selectivity for our compounds. Next, please. We look at that, so DNA intercalation assay, as I explained earlier, that, does this compound binds to the DNA? No, those compounds are not binding to DNA. They are not binding to the XPA, which is like, homolog of the Cu. We also did the thermal shift assay, we did in the cellular context, and we look at that, does this compound bind having the target engagement, and all these four compounds having good target engagement with the Cu protein. Next slide. So this is the chemosensitization and cellular inhibition of Cu, and this is the really good mechanism of action I can explain over here. What we did, we look at the mouse embryo MEF cell lines, that mouse embryo fibroblast cell lines where you have the Cu70 knockout mice. And if you look at, as I said, then this compound should not show any single agent activity. They should, show the activity in the synergism with the radiomimetic agent, which are inducing the DNA double strand breaks. And if you look at here, the green circle, when you have the bleomycin, there is bleomycin single agent activities there. But when we have our compound 68, which is not that important, but still we use in the initial studies, you can see almost threefold, increase in the synergism. And then when we knock out this Cu80, and then if you look at that Cu80 when we knock out, it's completely almost sixfold. If you compare the green circle versus green triangle, almost sixfold increase in the activity. And when we are using with the Q18 knockout cells and then our 68 compound, it has almost similar effect. So it proves that, whatever the chemosensitized, it proves two things. One is that, Q is very important to activate the whole NHG pathway. When you knock out the Q, obviously you get the chemosensitivity. And then second thing is that whatever our compound is doing, it's really having the target engagement and showing the cellular inhibition. Next slide, please. So we have some, exciting cellular data, exciting animal data, but our patenting process is still going on. So I'm not going to talk about much about it. But to summarize my talk, that with the Q DNA-PK inhibitors, we have successfully developed highly potent and selective DNA-PK inhibitors by targeting unique interaction. Our novel DNA-PK inhibitors also reduce the whole NHG pathway in vitro, also in cell culture models. Lead compounds also capable of sensitizing the DNA DSP inducing agent. I just showed you data with bleomycin, but this compound also shows the chemosensitivity with radiotherapy also. The another approach with this one, because if you follow the CRISPR-Cas9, the CRISPR-Cas9 induces the DNA double strand break. And then, there is a lot of mutation, improper cutting happens. We can use this, and we have the data with this one, but we are going to publish that one soon. The DNA-PK inhibitors we can utilize to increase the efficacy of the homologous DNA repair pathway, which is important for the CRISPR-Cas9 complete good genome editing. So further structure-active relationship is going on in our lab. We are going to change to furan to pyridine and pyrrole ring, and that's going underway. Some of the data we have, but we are still waiting to get more data. Next slide, please. I would like to thank multiple collaborators. Our lab is just established last year, and then we have almost 11 lab members working in the lab. So from the research assistant professor to research scientist, postdoc, and PhD. We have multiple positions in our group, one for the PhD and then for postdoc. So I would like to say that I would like to thank all the collaborators, mainly with the anti-cancer work with Dr. John Turchi, NearX Biosciences VP Catherine Polzak, Arun Rishi from the KCI, Elizabeth Raith. Recently, we are able to collaborate with Rajkumar from the Central Punjab University. We are working on the small project. Also in the Lito, we are working on the KRAS project with him. And then we also collaborated with Raymond Shinaji. We have another project going on, which is we are developing the COVID-19 drug treatment, and one of our compound is showing that more activity than the remdesivir. We are just optimizing our ADME properties with that one. Raymond Shinaji's group is excellent. He developed almost, I think, 3 drugs for the HIV, HCV, and all of them. And then we are also working on with the nanotechnology people, the collaborators, Dr. Arun Iyer, and we are also collaborating with structural biologist, Dr. Kowari, Jay Rasser, and then also Norris from the Schrodinger. I would like to thank funding agencies like NIH, NearX Biosciences for subcontracting and developing some small business grants. Wayne State University and IUPI for all the fundings. Thank you.
Nana, if you see in the chat box, there is a question asked.
Yes.
Let me answer it. Or do you want me to read it?
No, I think I can read. So Nirjat Shah is asking, in the SAR study of RP inhibitors, did you consider the indole ring or quinazolin ring instead of quinoline as a heterocyclic core? And what is the effect of these rings, if you have considered it? That's a good question. We have that one in mind, that we are going to change that core to different ring system. We did some preliminary studies with indole ring and the quinazolin ring. We also replaced that quinazolin ring with other more like the EGFR kind of inhibitors, and they are showing some activity, but we are not having that great success as we have with the current ring system. Yeah, that's all. I think that's one question there is. If you have any other question, I'm happy to answer them.
So hello Dr. Gowande. I have one quick question for you.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, in the last you mentioned that the molecules can enhance the HDR in case of CRISPR-Cas editing. So how they are going to do that? What can be the principle behind that, and how it could be further utilized in editing part?
I think I have that slide, but it's okay. So what happened, the CRISPR-Cas9 induces DNA double-strand breaks. And when it induces DNA double-strand break, there are two pathways, as I said earlier. One is non-homologous end joining pathway, and one is homology-directed repair pathway. So the homology-directed repair pathway makes the perfect cut, proper cut. Okay. Yeah. So if you have two pathways going on, when you are having the CRISPR-Cas9 induce, there is improper cuts because SDR is doing other way, NHAG is doing other way. When we use this inhibitor to block the NHAG, so specifically whatever the cut is going to the SDR pathway, and that's why we are increasing the efficacy of SDR pathway by blocking NHAG pathway.
Yeah, that's really interesting to know. Because increasing the efficacy of CRISPR editing will be really good.
Yes, we have a lot of people are interested, but we are still trying to develop what is happening with our compounds, some of the compounds, cellular efficacy. When it comes to the cellular context, if you look at those compound ring structure, we still need to optimize, and cellular efficacy is one factor. Once we improve the cellular efficacy, I think we'll be good in there, increasing the efficacy. We have some preliminary data. We have almost 14% increase in the efficacy, but we want to get that one to almost 80% to 90%.
Thank you, Nona.
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation as well as answering these questions.
Thank you.